The galaxy was old and full of many species, each with their own histories of triumph and survival. But among them, the Krith Dominion stood as one of the strongest. For centuries, they had expanded their empire by force. Their warriors were feared for their skill in battle, their fleets were unmatched, and their technology gave them confidence that no world could resist them. Now, they had set their eyes on a world that had long been marked on stellar maps as uninhabitable. The world was known by many names across different records. Some called it a cursed sphere. Others simply marked it with a warning, Class X Deathworld. No one lived there, at least not for long. The storms were constant, the mountains unstable, the rivers poisoned, and the creatures far too dangerous for most species to handle. Even the Krith themselves had lost scouts who tried to study the planet years ago. Yet new intelligence reached the Dominion High Command. Reports suggested that this world was not empty. Signals, small, strange, but clearly artificial, had been detected on the surface. Someone was living there. The Krith leaders laughed when they first heard the news. Impossible, they said. No fragile life form could survive there. But curiosity turned to greed. If some unknown civilization could survive in a death world, perhaps they had discovered resources or techniques that could be useful to the Empire. And so, the order was given: conquer the death world. The Krith fleet arrived in orbit with little resistance. The skies of the world were wild with storms, lightning flashing like claws across the clouds. Even from space, the planet seemed alive, restless and hostile. The Krith warriors stood in their transports, proud and certain of victory. Among them was Commander Veyrath, a seasoned warrior who had crushed dozens of colonies before. He addressed his soldiers as they prepared for descent. "This is no different from any other conquest," he declared. "The planet is harsh, yes, but our armor is strong. Our weapons are mighty. The so-called inhabitants of this cursed rock will fall quickly. Remember your training, and this world will be ours." The warriors shouted their agreement, their confidence unshaken. The transports burned through the atmosphere and landed on the surface. The soldiers marched out, their heavy boots sinking into soil darkened by storms. The air was thick, hot, and sharp with minerals that stung the nose. Some of the younger soldiers coughed, but they quickly adjusted their helmets. At first, the landing seemed uneventful. No armies met them, no weapons fired. The only sounds were the roaring wind and the distant cries of strange beasts. But then, the planet itself seemed to test them. The Krith squad marched through a valley when the ground suddenly shook. Rocks tumbled down from the cliffs, crushing 2 soldiers before they could react. The rest raised their shields, but more quakes followed, splitting the ground beneath their feet. "Geological instability," muttered Veyrath. "Move quickly. This land is treacherous." They pressed on. Hours later, they reached a river. The water was greenish and thick, flowing fast between jagged rocks. One soldier, thirsty, bent down and filled a container. He took one sip and dropped instantly, choking as the toxins burned his throat. The others stared in horror. "The water is poison," Veyrath growled. "Mark this in your logs. No one drinks from these rivers." The march continued, but the dangers did not stop. Gigantic creatures lurked in the shadows. One beast, taller than a transport ship, roared from the trees and charged. Its hide was thick as stone, its claws sharper than steel. The Krith fired their weapons, and only after many blasts did the beast collapse, shaking the ground with its fall. Some soldiers cheered, others looked uneasy. If one creature had cost so much effort, what else waited in the dark? That night, the Krith camped on a plateau. They built defenses, posted guards, and tried to rest. Yet many could not sleep. The wind screamed around them, and strange calls echoed through the valleys. It was then that the first signs of intelligence appeared. One guard noticed movement on the cliffs nearby. Small figures, barely visible in the storm, were watching. When the guard raised his weapon, the figures vanished. Later, more eyes glowed faintly in the dark, but again disappeared when approached. Veyrath examined the reports. "Scouts," he decided. The inhabitants are real. They know this world better than we do. But do not fear. They are primitive. They hide in shadows because they cannot face us directly. The warriors nodded, though not all were convinced. At dawn, the Krith marched again. This time they found strange markings carved into rocks. Traps were hidden in the ground. Pits lined with spikes, snares strong enough to hold even armored soldiers. How could primitives build this? One warrior muttered. They are clever, Veyrath admitted, but not strong. We will crush them soon enough. The path narrowed into a canyon. There they saw something that made even the seasoned warriors stop in silence. On the cliffs above, in full view, stood a group of the inhabitants. They were not armored. They carried no glowing weapons. Their clothing was simple, patched from hides and woven fibers. Their bodies bore scars, their faces hard from years of struggle. They were humans. The Krith had heard of humans before, rumors of a young species from the edges of space. But these humans were not like the weaklings described in records. These were survivors, carved by the world itself. And what shocked the Krith most was not their appearance but their behavior. The humans moved with confidence in the deadly terrain. One man walked across a crumbling ledge as if it were solid ground. A woman climbed a cliff with nothing but her hands and feet, smiling as the storm whipped around her. Children, barely grown, darted between rocks carrying tools and supplies without fear. To the Krith, every step seemed impossible. To the humans, it was normal life. One soldier whispered, They live here as if the world is nothing. Veyrath's eyes narrowed. He felt something rare, uncertainty. The first encounter did not end in battle. The humans simply watched, their eyes sharp, their movements calm. Then, as the storm grew stronger, they disappeared again, fading into the wilderness like ghosts. The Krith warriors stood frozen, their earlier confidence shaken. For the first time, they understood a chilling truth. What they called death and disaster, the humans called survival. And the war for this world had only just begun. The Krith Dominion soldiers had never faced a world like this. Every step seemed to test their endurance. Every shadow hid a threat. Commander Veyrath led his squad cautiously through the jagged valleys, keeping eyes open for movement, weapons, ready. Yet no matter how alert they were, the humans of this death world remained almost invisible, moving like whispers in the storm. The Krith had assumed that survival here would be a challenge only for nature itself. Instead, they found life. Human. Life thriving in ways that defied reason. The first real test came when the squad entered a narrow canyon. The walls were sharp, jagged rocks looming over them, and the ground was slick with rain and mud. Water ran in thin streams, cutting channels into the earth, making footing unstable. A sudden roar shook the canyon. One of the Krith warriors stumbled, barely catching himself on a rock. Then from above, a rockslide thundered down. Several soldiers dove aside, but one was caught and pinned. Move! Move! Veyrath shouted. The terrain is against us, but we cannot stop now. When the dust cleared, Veyrath scanned the cliffs. Nothing moved. The Krith had assumed these were natural hazards, but the human scouts had been there. Tiny lines of rope and carved notches had guided the rocks to fall where intended. The canyon itself had become a trap. A young soldier, pale and shaking, whispered, They planned it. Veyrath said nothing. He simply clenched his fists. He had underestimated humans before. But not again. The Krith continued through the canyon. Ahead they found a river, its waters thick and green, bubbling with unseen poisons. In the past, such a river would have been a stopping point for any army. But the humans did not build bridges or barriers. They crossed naturally, leaping from rock to rock with astonishing agility. The Krith watched in disbelief. One human child, not more than 12 cycles old, ran across the slick stones as if walking on solid ground. Another, carrying a bundle of supplies, navigated currents that could have swept away armored soldiers. "This is impossible," muttered a veteran Krith soldier. "They are just children." Veyrath shook his head. "No, these are survivors. Every child here is trained by the world itself. They understand danger better than we understand our own weapons." The Krith pressed on, thinking that speed and technology would still give them advantage. But the humans had turned the land into an ally. Every tree, every cliff, every boulder was a tool in their hands. At dusk, the Krith set up camp in a narrow clearing. They attempted to rest, but the human tactics began again. Small fires flickered far off in the shadows, drawing attention away from their true positions. Strange symbols, scratched into rocks, indicated traps nearby. And all around, the wind carried noises that seemed unnatural. Footsteps, whispers, but no one could be seen. Veyrath knew the humans were watching, not from curiosity but strategy. They understood fear, and they used it. The first direct contact came as dawn broke. A group of human scouts approached, not with weapons raised, but with a calm, measured pace. The Krith warriors, expecting confrontation, raised their rifles, aiming at the humans. But the humans stopped at a distance, their eyes meeting the Krith's. There was no fear. No hesitation. Only confidence. One human stepped forward, tall and lean, face scarred by years of storms. She raised her hand, not in surrender, but in greeting. "Who are you?" Veyrath demanded. "Why do you live here? This world will kill you." The human smiled faintly. "We live because we must," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "This world does not frighten us. We respect it, and it respects us." The Krith soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. No, one had spoken to them like this before. To every other species they had conquered, fear was the first reaction. Not here. Suddenly the human scouts moved, not in flight but in motion as if guided by the terrain itself. They ran toward a ridge, leaping and climbing with incredible skill. Rocks slid beneath their feet, branches snapped, water splashed. But they moved flawlessly. The Krith froze. They had expected resistance, weapons, armor, but instead saw survival perfected into an art. A young human leaped over a stream and caught a falling branch, using it to vault onto a higher ledge. Another child climbed a cliff using only the cracks and roots, smiling as if it were a playground. "Stop," Veyrath shouted. "They are just mortals. Stop thinking they are superhuman." But even he could not deny it. The humans' coordination, balance, and confidence in the deadly environment were unmatched. Every move they made seemed to turn danger into advantage. The Krith attempted to pursue, firing weapons to intimidate. But the humans did not flee. Instead, they led the Krith into natural traps. A sudden sinkhole swallowed part of a squad. A narrow passage funneled soldiers into a rockfall, and a muddy slope caused armored warriors to slide helplessly toward the river. The humans moved like shadows, unseen but fully in control. Veyrath realized the terrifying truth. The humans were not just surviving. They were fighting alongside the world itself. The Deathworld had become their weapon. One of his lieutenants, voice trembling, said, "Commander, they aren't afraid of us. They aren't afraid of anything." Veyrath could not respond. He watched as a human girl, no taller than his knee, climbed a tree to signal others with hand gestures. Soon humans appeared from every angle, surrounding the Krith with minimal visibility. They carried no glowing weapons, no advanced armor, yet the Krith felt trapped. As the sun climbed higher, the humans demonstrated another skill, adaptive strategy. They did not attack directly. Instead, they guided the Krith along paths filled with obstacles. One group caused a flood to sweep across a ravine. Another toppled rocks to block a narrow canyon. The Krith realized that their weapons, no matter how advanced, were useless against a species that treated survival as second nature. "Fall back," Veyrath ordered. "Regroup at the plateau." But even retreat was not simple. The humans had anticipated it. Lines of rope, camouflaged spikes, and even trained animals harassed the Krith soldiers. Each attempt to advance or withdraw was met with resistance from the very land itself, guided by humans. The Krith warriors froze in disbelief. They had never faced an enemy that used the environment like armor and weapon combined. Every step forward felt like walking through an invisible battlefield they could not see. By the end of the day, the Krith camped once more, exhausted and shaken. They had not lost a battle in decades, yet here they had been outmaneuvered by a species they had considered weak. Veyrath, sitting atop a jagged rock, studied the horizon. The humans were nowhere to be seen, yet their presence was felt everywhere. He whispered almost to himself, "This is something else. These humans, they do not fight like anyone I have known. They survive, and in surviving they are stronger than armies." The Krith soldiers, once proud, now sat quietly. Some avoided looking at the cliffs, fearful of what might appear next. Even the most seasoned veterans were uneasy. For the humans, the dangers of the Deathworld were routine. For the Krith, the same dangers were terror, skillfully amplified by humans who knew how to live with them. As night fell, the wind howled across the jagged cliffs. Strange, shadowed figures moved in the distance, watching, waiting, calculating. The humans were preparing not to flee but to defend, and perhaps even turn the invaders' assumptions against them. Veyrath understood then the challenge ahead. This was no ordinary world, and these were no ordinary humans. The Krith warriors would soon learn that on this Deathworld, survival was not just instinct, it was mastery, and mastery could be terrifying. The Krith Dominion soldiers had faced countless battles across the galaxy, but nothing prepared them for the humans of the Deathworld. Every movement they made seemed to be guided by instinct, strategy, and a deep understanding of the land itself. Each step they took brought them closer to disaster, and the humans, always unseen, watched, calculated, and adapted. Commander Veyrath knew this was no ordinary fight. His warriors were skilled, armored, and armed with weapons designed to annihilate enemies. Yet here, in this violent, untamed world, none of that seemed to matter. The Krith had decided to strike at a human settlement. Their goal was simple: locate the base, destroy it, and prove that no species could survive the Deathworld. They marched in formation, weapons ready, their armor gleaming under the harsh sunlight. But the humans had anticipated them. Every trail was carefully guided. Fallen logs blocked obvious paths. Loose rocks and mudslides hid potential hazards, and even the rivers, which seemed shallow and harmless, were treacherous with hidden currents. Veyrath's soldiers stumbled repeatedly. Heavy armor slowed them, while the humans moved with surprising speed and grace. It was clear that the humans had turned the terrain itself into a weapon. The first real encounter began in a canyon. The Krith saw movement above. From the cliffs, arrows, spears, and rocks began to fall, not randomly, but with precise timing and calculation. Soldiers ducked and fired, but each human attack was backed by the land. Loose rocks slid into attackers' paths. Mud caused armored warriors to stumble, and sudden gusts of wind sent debris flying. "This is madness," shouted a Krith warrior, swinging his weapon at a falling boulder. "How can mortals fight like this?" "They aren't mortal," Veyrath said through gritted teeth. "They are survivors. And here, survival is their greatest weapon." One of the younger Krith soldiers fell, trapped in a mudslide triggered by a clever human trap. The soldier struggled, but before help could arrive, another boulder slid down, forcing the Krith to retreat. Each loss weighed heavily on their confidence. The humans revealed something else: coordination, unlike any other species. Scouts appeared and disappeared with no warning, herding Krith soldiers into natural traps. Rivers surged when they needed to, cliffs gave way, and narrow passes became death corridors. Every step the Krith took was carefully anticipated. Veyrath realized the terrifying truth. The humans were not using weapons in the usual sense. Instead, they were weaponizing survival itself. The Deathworld had trained them to anticipate, adapt, and use the environment to their advantage, and they did it naturally, instinctively, without hesitation. Hours passed. The Krith attempted to push through a thick forest, believing that cover and numbers would help. But the humans had prepared. Branches moved almost as if alive. Vines were tied to hidden stakes, and fallen logs formed hidden barriers. Krith soldiers tripped repeatedly, weapons getting stuck, armor weighed down by mud. A human warrior appeared on a high branch. She leaped down onto a boulder, landing gracefully despite the storm and with a swift motion. Disarmed a Krith soldier using nothing but her hands and feet. He struggled, but the humans were always faster, always smarter in this terrain. Veyrath watched, jaw tight. He realized that no technology could give him the advantage here. The humans understood the world in ways he could not, and that understanding was deadly. The Krith regrouped near a riverbank, trying to regain control. They had lost several soldiers and were running low on morale. "Commander," said a lieutenant, voice tense, "we cannot continue like this. Every path is a trap, every move anticipated. We need to rethink our approach." Veyrath's gaze swept over the turbulent waters. "Rethink?" he said. "No. We adapt, or we die. These humans are clever, yes, but cleverness cannot stand against numbers, cannot stand against weapons. We will push through." Yet even as he spoke, a massive predator, camouflaged in the forest, lunged from the underbrush. The Krith fired, but the beast was fast and agile. Several soldiers fell, their armor useless against the sheer power of the creature. The humans appeared briefly, guiding the predator toward the Krith. They did not fight directly, but their influence was clear. The Deathworld itself was part of their army. The Krith decided to split into smaller squads, thinking they could outmaneuver the humans. But each squad found itself in isolated traps, quicksand pits, falling rocks, and sudden mudslides. Soldiers screamed as the ground gave way beneath them, while humans moved above and around unharmed, almost like shadows. In one canyon, Veyrath watched a human boy, no more than 15 cycles old, climb a near-vertical cliff. The boy carried a bundle of supplies, smiling as if it were a simple game. From his vantage point, he signaled others, coordinating movements that guided Krith soldiers into natural hazards. Veyrath could hardly believe his eyes. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They fight with the world itself." By nightfall, the Krith had suffered heavy losses. Exhaustion, fear, and confusion spread among the soldiers. For the first time, they questioned their mission. The humans had not attacked with weapons in the traditional sense, yet they had dominated the battlefield. The humans, in contrast, retreated to hidden shelters, appearing only when necessary. Their eyes glowed faintly in the storm as they observed the Krith. There was no cruelty in their gaze, only calm confidence and an understanding of the terrain that made them appear almost supernatural. Veyrath made a decision. They would regroup at a high plateau where they could rest and plan. But even this simple maneuver was complicated by the humans. Hidden lines of rope, clever traps, and the terrain itself slowed the Krith progress. Soldiers slipped, fell, and struggled through obstacles designed not to kill but to exhaust and disorient. When they finally reached the plateau, Veyrath surveyed the battlefield below. Everywhere, the effects of human strategy were visible. Mudslides toppled trees, boulders dislodged in carefully controlled chaos. Soldiers who had fallen earlier were nowhere to be seen, either rescued or trapped. "This is unlike any enemy we've faced," admitted a lieutenant. "They fight with their minds, not just weapons." Veyrath nodded grimly. "And with their land. Remember this, the Deathworld is not just a battlefield. It is their partner. And until we understand that, we cannot win." For the first time, fear touched Veyrath. The humans of this planet were not weak. They were masters of survival, and survival here meant turning death itself into a tool. As night descended, the Krith watched the stars and listened to the storm. In the darkness, the humans moved unseen, preparing for the next day. Small lights flickered among the cliffs, signals and warnings. Animals trained or naturally allied with humans patrolled the perimeters. Every rock, every tree, every river had been mapped in the minds of the Deathworlders. Veyrath realized something that chilled him. The humans did not need technology to dominate this world. They needed only knowledge, skill, and courage. And the Krith soldiers had neither in this environment. "Commander," whispered a young soldier, "we can't fight them. Not like this, we can't win." Veyrath did not answer immediately. He watched as a human girl appeared briefly on a cliff edge, raising her hand as if acknowledging the Krith without fear. Her confidence, calm in the face of an army, spoke, louder than any weapon. Finally, he said, "We will survive this night. Tomorrow, we will fight smarter. But know this, soldier. These humans, they are unlike anything we have faced, and the galaxy will soon understand why." The Krith had entered the Deathworld thinking they would conquer it with weapons and force, but the humans had shown them a new reality. Survival itself was an art, a strategy, and a weapon. The aliens had faced storms, predators, and terrain before, but never a species that could move with the world as an ally. By the time the night was over, the Krith camped silently, exhausted and wary. The humans were nowhere to be seen, yet their presence was everywhere, woven into every trap, every clever maneuver, every challenge the Krith had faced. Veyrath stared at the horizon, knowing that the next encounter would not be simple. The humans of the Deathworld had turned survival into supremacy, and every soldier in his army had begun to understand that this would be a war unlike any other. The battle for the Deathworld had only begun, and already the Krith felt the first hints of fear. The Krith Dominion's fleet hovered above the Deathworld, dark shadows against the stormy sky. Commander Veyrath stared at the jagged mountains below, his jaw tight. His forces were battered, exhausted, and wary. The humans, they had assumed, were weak were anything but. Each encounter left the Krith soldiers more uneasy. "Commander," a lieutenant said, his voice tense, "our squads have been decimated. The humans, they do not fight like anyone we know. Every attack, every movement, they are unstoppable in this terrain." Veyrath did not answer immediately. He watched the lightning strike across the cliffs, illuminating the landscape in stark flashes. "Unstoppable?" he repeated. "No, they are not unstoppable. They are clever, yes. But cleverness alone does not win battles. Prepare reinforcements. We will crush them. No more hesitation, no more traps. We take the fight." To them, the Krith had never been denied victory for long. Their pride demanded it, and so they sent in reinforcements, soldiers, armored mechs, and heavy artillery designed to break any resistance. The humans had been waiting. They did not panic. Their scouts moved through the forests and cliffs, relaying information to leaders hidden in reinforced shelters. Every step the Krith took was monitored, every advance anticipated. The Deathworld itself was their weapon. As the reinforcements marched into the valleys, the humans set their plan into motion. Small teams guided the Krith toward natural hazards that had been carefully prepared. Flooded ravines, unstable cliffs, and mudslides awaited the invaders. The soldiers marched with confidence, thinking their numbers would overwhelm the humans, but they had underestimated the mastery of survival the humans possessed. One armored mech attempted to cross a narrow pass. It got stuck, its massive legs sinking into the mud while rocks above were loosened and sent tumbling down, crushing supply units behind it. A group of Krith soldiers tried to assist, only to find themselves trapped in a network of pits camouflaged by leaves and branches. The humans watched, calm and silent. They did not need to fight directly. Their tactics were precise, calculated, and deadly, using the Deathworld itself as a partner. Every rock, every slope, every sudden gust of wind worked in their favor. Veyrath realized the terrible truth. The humans had turned survival into strategy. They did not merely survive. They dominated the battlefield by moving in harmony with the land, understanding its hazards and using them to trap, confuse, and exhaust the Krith. They fight with the world itself, whispered a soldier, voice trembling. And they are laughing at us. Indeed, the humans seemed almost playful in the chaos. Children carried supplies across cliffs, women guided squads of predators away from their paths, and men coordinated traps from the heights, unseen and untouchable. Each move was precise, almost like a dance. The Krith tried to regroup in a high plateau, hoping to reorganize their forces and use superior firepower to turn the tide. But even this was not simple. Hidden ropes and pulleys caused boulders to fall unpredictably. Flooded crevices swallowed their vehicles. Even the air itself seemed hostile as lightning struck dangerously close to armored units. One of Veyrath's lieutenant said quietly, "Commander, we are losing control. Every time we advance, they guide us into danger. Even the storms seem under their control." Veyrath's jaw tightened. For the first time, he could see the fear in his own men. This was not like any enemy he had faced before. No matter how advanced the Krith technology, no matter how strong their soldiers, the humans used intelligence, agility, and their understanding of the land to stay ahead. He gritted his teeth. Then we fight smarter. We learn from them. But we do not retreat. Never retreat. The next battle began as the Krith attempted a direct assault on a human shelter. Heavy artillery fired across the cliffs, expecting to break the humans' defenses, but the humans were ready. Channels in the terrain diverted explosions harmlessly, and trenches and shelters built from reinforced rock absorbed the impact. From hidden perches, humans used nothing but simple tools and their strength to maneuver the Krith into deadly positions. Soldiers found themselves pinned between cliffs and rivers, forced to fight in conditions they had no control over. Mechs were guided into mud and water, immobilized by the clever manipulation of terrain. Veyrath watched in disbelief as a human leader directed the battle with calm precision. She pointed to one cliff, and lightning struck in perfect timing, short-circuiting one of the Krith mechs. Another signal guided a boulder to fall, blocking retreat paths. It was clear. The humans were not fighting blindly. They were orchestrating the Deathworld itself as an extension of their own power. The morale of the Krith soldiers collapsed further when they realized the humans did not fear them. Each soldier who fell, each machine disabled, only seemed to make the humans more confident. Children, women, and men alike moved through the battlefield as if it were a controlled environment, anticipating danger, surviving the impossible, and turning it against the enemy. Veyrath saw one of his commanders fall into a pitfall, trying to save a soldier. The humans had anticipated this, guiding him into a trap that neutralized multiple units at once. The soldiers screamed, struggled, and fought, but the humans moved with the calm efficiency of predators who understood every shadow, every slope, every hazard. A young Krith soldier whispered to his companion, They don't just survive. They are stronger because of it." Veyrath nodded silently. He had realized the same truth. The humans had weaponized adaptation itself. The Krith attempted night raids next, thinking the darkness would give them an advantage. But the humans moved like phantoms, unseen, coordinated, and deadly. Fires lit, here and there distracted the invaders while other humans guided predators and environmental hazards toward them. One soldier said shakily, "Commander, the darkness. They are everywhere but nowhere. How can this be?" "They understand this world better than we ever could," Veyrath admitted, voice low. "And that knowledge is worth more than weapons, more than armor. Never forget it." By the time the dawn broke again, the Krith army had suffered massive losses. Entire squads had been immobilized, vehicles destroyed, and soldiers exhausted. The humans had not fired a single energy weapon, yet the battlefield was a testament to their strategy, skill, and mastery of survival. Veyrath gathered his remaining officers. His expression was grim. "We cannot continue like this," he said. "Our weapons are ineffective, our numbers are meaningless, and our soldiers are losing hope. We underestimated them. But retreat is not an option. We must learn Officers looked at each other uneasily. They had been trained to conquer, to overwhelm, and to win, but now they faced something beyond brute force. Humans had turned fear into strength, adversity into strategy, and survival into supremacy. One officer finally said, "Commander, they are terrifying, not because they are strong, but because they are smart, fearless, and unbreakable." Veyrath nodded slowly. He could not deny it. The humans were unlike any species he had ever faced, and the Krith had learned the hard way that no amount of technology or numbers could overcome someone who considered death, danger, and disaster as ordinary life. By nightfall, the Krith retreated to a defensible plateau, exhausted and demoralized. Soldiers sat silently, some staring at the cliffs, fearful of unseen traps. Even the elite warriors of the Dominion had begun to whisper legends of the humans' abilities. In the distance, small fires flickered along the cliffs, signals, and watch points. Humans moved unseen, preparing for the next day. Veyrath knew they would not stop. They could not. The humans did not fight for conquest. They fought for survival, for home, and for mastery of the Deathworld, and that made them unstoppable. Veyrath gazed at the horizon, rain and lightning cutting across the sky. He understood something terrifying. The humans were not just defenders of their world. They were legends in the making, a species capable of turning the impossible into routine and fear itself into weakness. He whispered to no one in particular, "This is not a battle of weapons, it is a battle of life itself, and I fear we are losing." The Krith would continue to fight. They could not surrender. But the humans had shown them that survival was more than instinct. It was strategy. It was power. It was an art perfected over generations of living on a world that killed the unprepared. And as the Krith soldiers slept uneasily that night, the humans trained their young, guided their animals, and prepared traps. Every cliff, every river, every forest became a classroom and a battlefield at once. The message was clear. The Deathworld would not bow to any empire, and anyone who tried to conquer it would learn to fear humans above all else. The war was far from over, but already, the Krith understood the truth. The humans had turned fear into defeat, and against them, no army, no matter how mighty, could hope to stand unbroken. The Krith Dominion retreated across the jagged valleys of the Deathworld, battered, exhausted, and shaken. For the first time in history, an enemy had challenged them in ways their weapons could not overcome. Commander Veyrath's armored units, once symbols of fear and power across galaxies, moved slowly, careful not to trigger any further traps. But the humans, silent, unseen, and confident, were everywhere. Above them, lightning split the sky, illuminating distant cliffs. The humans moved like shadows, always observing, always ready. They had not needed advanced weapons or overwhelming numbers. Their mastery of the Deathworld itself had done the work for them. Veyrath paused atop a plateau, surveying the damage. Craters, toppled trees, mudslides, and overturned vehicles painted a grim picture. Several squads had been lost entirely. Even survivors moved slowly, shaking from exhaustion. "Commander," one lieutenant said quietly, "we cannot continue. They fight with the land itself. We've underestimated them. If we advance again, we risk total annihilation." Veyrath nodded, the weight of truth heavy on his shoulders. He had spent decades leading armies, winning wars, and crushing planets. But here on this savage world, he realized something he had never before understood. Survival could be a weapon far deadlier than any cannon, far stronger than any fleet. "They are humans," he said almost to himself. "And they are not ordinary. They fight differently. They survive differently. And that makes them legends." The humans, meanwhile, did not celebrate. They had defended their home with precision, cunning, and courage. Every cliff, every ravine, and every forest had been part of the battlefield. Children practiced agility courses on unstable rocks. Women and men reinforced shelters and set clever traps, and elders observed from high perches, teaching the younger generation to read the land like a map, to predict storms, and to anticipate predators. To the humans, this was everyday life. What the Krith saw as danger, the humans saw as routine. Their laughter and movement carried a calm confidence born of countless generations surviving where others could not. The Krith had attempted to regroup near a high plateau to prepare a counterattack, but the humans had already anticipated it. They guided the Dominion forces with subtle traps, mudslides that slowed movement, fallen trees that blocked paths, and hidden pitfalls camouflaged by leaves. Even the air seemed to betray the invaders, as lightning strikes and sudden storms forced the Krith to pause or retreat. By the time night fell, the Krith forces were diminished and demoralized. Soldiers whispered of ghosts in the cliffs, and creatures who move like the wind. Commander Veyrath gathered his remaining troops, knowing that their empire's reputation could not withstand another defeat here. "We fight with courage," he told them, "but courage alone cannot win this battle. We will retreat and live to fight another day. Remember this, humans survive differently, and that difference makes them stronger than any army." As the Krith departed, the humans watched silently. They did not cheer or taunt. Instead, they moved carefully to clear traps that might hurt the land itself, guiding predators back to their territories, repairing structures, and tending to the wounded among their own. Every action reflected discipline, intelligence, and respect for life, for the world, for each other, and even for those who had invaded. In the galaxy beyond the Deathworld, the Krith told tales of what they had faced. Stories spread quickly among neighboring species. Whispers of humans who could move through storms, who could walk across cliffs, who could wrestle predators and survive deadly rivers without fear, became legend. Across systems, young soldiers were warned, do not underestimate humans. They are trained by worlds where death is common and life is mastery. On the Deathworld, life returned to its usual rhythm. Humans continued daily routines, preparing food, tending fires, repairing shelters, and teaching children survival skills. But the younger generation knew that the galaxy had begun to take notice. Tales of Krith soldiers frozen in fear, of armies guided into traps, and of Deathworlders who could turn natural hazards into weapons inspired awe. A human leader, standing on a cliff overlooking the plains, spoke quietly to her group. "They will return," she said. "Other armies may come. They may bring more weapons. But we have the world, we have each other, and we have what they cannot understand. The strength born from living where survival is not choice, it is necessity." Children laughed as they practiced running across unstable rocks, climbing trees, and leaping through streams. To them, these were games, but in reality, they were training to defend their home and their heritage. Every fall taught balance. Every storm taught courage. Every encounter with predators taught strategy. Back in the galaxy, the Krith Dominion's defeat became a cautionary tale. Species that had once dismissed humans as fragile began to pay attention. Maps marked with Class X Deathworlds now included a warning: inhabited by humans. Approach with caution. Merchants, travelers, and explorers whispered of the Deathworlders, a species who laughed at danger, survived impossible conditions, and could turn adversity itself into power. The Krith, proud conquerors across star systems, had learned that humans were not to be underestimated. Veyrath, once the most confident commander of the Dominion, reflected on the battles. He had always believed in technology, strategy, and force, but here none of that had sufficed. Humans had shown that the combination of courage, intelligence, and survival instincts was a weapon beyond any technology. "They are stronger because they live differently," he muttered. "Because they do not fear death, storms, or predators. Because danger is part of life, not something to avoid." His officers nodded solemnly, understanding that their reports would change the perception of humans forever. No longer would any species assume humans were weak. No longer would the Krith consider any Deathworld an easy conquest. Meanwhile, on the cliffs and valleys of the Deathworld, humans continued their lives, thriving where others could not. Each day was a test, each challenge a lesson. Their weapons were simple, their tools basic, yet their strength came from knowledge, skill, and unity. They knew the planet, respected it, and used it to sharpen their abilities. From the highest peaks to the deepest forests, humans trained, prepared, and lived. They were not heroes seeking glory. They were ordinary people mastering extraordinary circumstances. And yet to any observer from beyond their world, they seemed like legends. In the final moments of the Krith retreat, one of Veyrath's soldiers looked back at the cliffs. Lightning flashed, revealing human figures standing tall, calm, and unafraid. "They are smiling," he said softly. "Even now, they are smiling at us." Veyrath nodded. "Yes," he said, "and that is what makes them terrifying. Not hate, not anger, but the calm strength of knowing who they are and what they can endure. The galaxy has never seen anything like this, and it may never again." The Krith fleet ascended into the stormy skies, leaving the Deathworld behind. But their stories, filled with fear and awe, spread across systems. Humans became more than a species. They became symbols of resilience, intelligence, and courage. Across star systems, the legend grew. The Deathworlders, who considered storms, predators, and death itself as part of life, and who had mastered survival to a degree that no empire could overcome. As the humans gathered at their settlements, tending fires and repairing shelters, children played games that mimicked the battles that had just occurred. Each leap across rocks, each climb of a cliff, each careful crossing of a stream carried lessons. Every movement was practice for survival, every mistake a teacher. An elder watched from a cliff edge, speaking softly. "They will return," he said, "but we are ready. This world has made us strong. Our people have learned to live where others fear to tread. And that is why no army can defeat us." The children laughed, running through the rain, carrying supplies and practicing skills that would one day keep them alive. To them, this was life. To the galaxy, it was legend in motion. And somewhere above, far in space, the Krith Dominion fleets moved cautiously, sharing warnings, spreading tales of humans who fought not with weapons alone, but with the mastery of life itself. The Deathworlders had not just survived, they had become immortal in the stories of the galaxy. Their courage, skill, and harmony with their deadly home would inspire fear, respect, and awe for generations. And the planet, harsh and unforgiving, watched silently, knowing it had trained its people well.